This is the Straight Up Breakdown Podcast.
Exclusively on the Herd Out Media Network.
Tell it to me straight up.
Hello, and welcome into the Straight Up Breakdown Podcast, proudly part of the Hail Varsity Network. I am Greg Smith. It's spring break for the Nebraska football team. Though it's not really spring break for me, that just means that really I don't have to go down to the stadium this week, friend. Today I'm joined by sports director for KFOR, FM 103.3 and 1240 AM, Jeff Motz. Jeff, thank you so much for being on the show. How are you, man?
Good. I'm doing terrific, Greg. Good to see you. Good to catch up with you. It's been a while since we chatted.
Yeah, it has been a while since we chatted. For those of you who actually don't know, because now it's been long enough to where people probably have come to this and come to my writing without knowing this. But once upon a time, I'm at a show over on ESPN 1480. And Motz was a great coworker of mine. So a high school sports enthusiast. We won't go down his favorite teams because we've had some disagreements on all of that. But there are congratulations in order. I want to get this on the pod. Jeff was honored this week during Nebraska High School State Championships with the NSAA Distinguished Service Award. So Jeff, definitely big congrats on that off top.
I appreciate it, Greg. And, you know, the people that I've worked with in the past that have helped do games, I think you've been included too at one point when you were working over there with us. It's tremendous to have a staff that pitches in, and with the week-long tournament that we had this year, due to the Big Ten Wrestling Championships the weekend before, we knew the task was going to be a challenge, and we got through it. And Chris Schmidt, he was doing such a great job, flying colors for him. Connor Clark, who's one of our part-time guys, and Will Wilson, who you know very well and working with him in the past, and countless others behind the scenes, from Jeff Bryden to Elijah Herbal and many others that have helped contribute to the success that we've had with our high school sports coverage. And, you know, with KFOR, we've been doing the Sportscasters Club for over 65 years. This goes back to at least the early to mid 1950s, way before you and I even existed.
Right.
And it's amazing on how many generations of athletes have been covered. You know, my dad, myself, my brother, we were all participating in games that were covered on the radio by KFOR over the years, and now KLMS has been in the fray with it too. So, you know, it's nice to have two signals to where we could do that. And we got through the week of the state tournament where we thought there was no way we're going to get through it, and we did. And it ended on a good note with one Lincoln team winning the state championship in boys basketball. Parkview Christian did it in D2. So nice to go out the bang, and also to get that nice award from the NSAA this weekend as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're definitely I definitely wanted to have Motz on to talk about that in even more detail. We're going to come back. We're going to table that for a quick second, though. And we definitely got to kick it off with Coach Speak, where we go over something that a player, a coach, or a talking head said, and then we give you the straight up breakdown of what they meant.
Coach Speak to Real Talk.
This week it comes courtesy of Tom Brady, who has made an appearance in this segment on the show before. This time, as everyone knows, unless you've been hiding out under a rock for the last day, he decided to unretire after being retired for a short bit from the NFL. He's had this to say, and I quote, "These past 2 months, I've realized my place is still on the field and not in the stands. That time will come, but it's not now. I love my teammates and I love my supportive family. They make it all possible. I am coming back for my 23rd season in Tampa."
Let's break that down.
So, Jeff, when you first heard that, what does that all mean?
He's not ready to quit. It's amazing because Tom Brady and I are the same age. I'll be 45 here in less than 2 weeks, and he'll be 45, I believe, in August. Mm-hmm. And to see a guy in his mid-40s compete at such a high level and big stage like the NFL is truly amazing. Now, you've seen guys in their mid-40s, even pushing 50, even beyond 50, play Major League Baseball.
Right.
You know, Satchel Paige, how old was he? He was in his 50s, well into his 50s when he finally retired. And then I think of Julio Franco in more modern times that, you know, I think he was in his early 50s when he last played in Major League Baseball. And I think he was still playing in some league down in South America at one point. And, you know, he's over 60 by now. But for Tom Brady to do that at almost 45 years of age. He will be 45 right in the middle of fall camp. And for him to come back and play the game that he loves so much and that's given a lot to him over the years is remarkable. I commend him. Maybe he's not quite ready yet for retirement. He thought he was, maybe to spend more time with family, which is great. And in our industry, Greg, as you know, with our schedules, it can be so hectic. You don't know when you're going to get a lot of downtime. And I think with Tom, I don't think he was used to it yet. And he wasn't ready. He's probably got something else that's burning at him. There's one more big challenge left. What is it? Is it to win another Super Bowl? Perhaps. Is it to go out any other way as a winner? Maybe. I don't know. I mean, maybe he's not ready to just settle down. And if he's still got that endurance desire at almost 45 years of age, more power to him. I think it's great. I don't know about any of the other teams in the NFL if they're liking it.
They probably don't feel the same.
They probably have an opposite opinion of myself and maybe a few other people. I never have always considered myself a Tom Brady fan. I've always admired him at what he's been able to do because he was a relatively unknown. You may remember when he first got into the league. He was I think he was Drew Bledsoe's backup, wasn't he?
Bledsoe's backup until Bledsoe took that shot in like the sternum, chest, collarbone area. And that knocked him out of that game. And then Brady came in and never left that job until he left.
Right. And the rest is history. And now he's back at Tampa, for a third season down there. So I think with what he said in that statement, I think he firmly believes in his own mind he's not ready yet to settle down. He feels like he can go out and do something and compete with those guys that are in their early to mid 20s, 30s. And yeah, he's going to be the old guy out there, but the way he plays football, you can't tell that he's in his mid 40s. And again, it's commendable.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really interesting. I don't know when the clip was from, but I had not seen it until late last night. There was a clip with Michael Irvin. I think he was on the NFL Network when he said this, where he was talking about, when guys retire from the NFL, it's because of two different things. It's either a lack of skill or a lack of will. And that lack of skill is what will really keep you from coming back, right? There's just no real reason, no real way for you to be able to come back to the game because it's just kind of passed you by. But if you have that lack of will, if you go home and sit there for a couple of weeks, that can come back. Was his essential point. And I do wonder, like kind of what you were saying about maybe he got home and he's sitting around and he goes, well, maybe I'm just not ready for this yet. Especially when you go, he's played 22 seasons. You've done this for over 20 years, and it's what you know and it's what you love, obviously, and you've done it at such a high level. Like I can totally see him getting home and just not really saying, or really just saying, hey, it's just not my time yet. It's not my time to go ahead and just kind of let football go. Now it's funny in a way to me that he also, I think he tweeted out like unfinished business. I would be really curious as to what's the unfinished business for Tom Brady at this point.
Well, that's the thing. Is he trying to be like Bill Russell and Red Auerbach, like the Boston Celtics were through the 50s and 60s? I mean, how many championship rings did Bill Russell get as a player and coach for the Celtics? Is he trying to do something like that? I mean, not really being a coach for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but is he trying to get to that level? I think it's about, wanting to achieve that certain status in professional sports that nobody else has ever done. I think in football, correct me if I'm wrong, he may be the oldest player ever to play the game of football. I know
he hit all sorts of records of like oldest player to throw a touchdown and there's all sorts of things like that he holds. And I do think though that you hit on something important about going into like his place in like professional sports history overall. That to me is really interesting because it's really hard as a football player to get mentioned in kind of the greats of the greats in sports, right? We don't talk about very many NFL guys in that level. It's always guys in other sports or individual sports that you end up talking about, right? And so for Brady to be one of the very few NFL guys or football players to then get mentioned, with the Jordans and the Gretzky and the Serena Williams and the Tiger Woods and those sorts of people, that's really special. And he can really, I don't know if he cement his place in that by winning another Super Bowl or anything like that, but it almost makes it to where you have to mention him in those conversations, even if he was not, as for his period of time, especially as prolific statistically as, say, a Peyton Manning or even a Drew Brees. He ended up with all of those records, but if some of that was longevity speaking. And so it's interesting to me, and maybe that is what he's going for.
It could very well be. I mean, what's the average age of retirement in the NFL? About 34, 35 years old.
Yeah, if that, because
give or take.
It's so difficult. Yeah, it's so much toll on your body.
Maybe it depends on the position too. But the other thing is with Tom Brady, he really hasn't been injured a whole lot. And that's one of the other things you see a lot of guys do when they play professional sports. There's another reason why they retire. They're banged up. Oh, yeah. They just can't go like they did before. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, I remember when Kareem retired after the 1989 finals, he was 42, and I thought, man, 42 years old and playing in the NBA. Well, Vince Carter, I think he was 43, 44. Yeah, I mean, he's a couple months older than me, and he went that long. He wasn't playing a lot. I mean, he was one of the greatest basketball players of all time in that league, but Kareem was still starting at the age of 42 for the Lakers, right in the middle of all the Showtime stuff. And that, of course, is when Detroit came in and they won their first NBA title in Detroit. And then they beat the Blazers the following year for their second in a row. And that's when we started to see kind of the downward trend in the Lakers, the dynasty that Jerry Buss built up. By the way, that show that's on HBO, we've seen first two episodes already. That's a great show.
Phenomenal.
John C. Reilly with a great portrayal of Jerry Buss, just tremendous. And the guy that plays Magic, spinning image of him.
Yeah, really good. They did a great job with that.
and the guy that looks like Jerry West. I mean, they've been able to pull off a lot of good lookalikes with the actors. And I'm hooked on it. And I mean, it's like, why can't they just upload them now? And then we just binge,
right.
binge
Let me
watch
binge them. I've already been conditioned to that. Just let me do it, please. Yeah. It feels weird when you're not able to do that anymore.
Yeah. And I was like, gosh, I wish they could do that, but I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to get people to come back every week and check it out. So that's totally understandable.
Old school.
But back to the point of Tom Brady again, and he's trying to cement something that I don't think has ever been done in the NFL. And again, he's going to be 45 this upcoming season, and being the starting quarterback. And most 45-year-old men like myself, if you're not, and I'm not in shape like I used to be. I mean, you're starting to slow down. You're starting to develop aches and pains and back issues and stuff like that. You're trying to take care of yourself and still try to remain active as much as possible. He's out there like he's in his mid-20s,
right,
having a good time. And why not? Go play, have fun, enjoy it while you can.
Yeah, as long as he can still do it physically. Yeah, absolutely. Just I could totally understand that. It's just so fascinating too. And of course, now we have entered the kind of legal tampering phase of NFL free agency right now. We're seeing all sorts of deals flying around right now. I think the Bucs brought back their Pro Bowl center, and we'll kind of see where it goes. I think they lost a couple of other offensive linemen though, so we'll kind of see about how they kind of retool and reshape that thing around him. But it's going to be fascinating to see. And of course, that storyline will just be huge throughout the NFL season coming up this year. And there's a few actually quarterback-driven storylines, not that there always isn't, but there's a couple other ones, like Aaron Rodgers and the saga that is with him and Green Bay.
That's just crazy.
Like that whole thing, like it's just, and then what's going to happen with Devontae Adams, because he came out today and said that he was not going to play under the franchise tag with the Packers because they're so far apart with the long-term negotiations. You got Russell Wilson changing teams. There's always a level of intrigue with like Dak Prescott and the Cowboys. Like there's just a lot there, as always with the NFL. As it feels like, even on Selection Sunday yesterday, the NFL stole a lot of the headlines with Tom Brady.
And that's well, and I guess that's understandable, but in the middle of a basketball selection show where the basketball popularity is probably at its highest right now, since we're going into the playing games tomorrow on Wednesday night in Dayton. So, but hey, more power to him. Best of luck to him this year. Hopefully he can get through unscathed.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one of the things we definitely want to talk about, like I mentioned earlier, was the 2022 Nebraska State High School Championships. Both girls and boys basketball happened last week. And like most was talking about, we covered it all, was there for all of it. So the first thing I kind of want to go there with you on is, what type of a process, I'm going to take people a little bit behind the curtain, what kind of a process was it to be able to cover all of that, given they were running both girls and boys at the same time? And like you said, you had the wrestling stuff going on as well.
When we found out, it was last spring or summer, when the news came out that the Big Ten Wrestling Championships were going to be held Saturday and Sunday, the first weekend of March. Typically, that is when the girls' state basketball tournament takes place. The boys happen the following weekend. Well, the NSAA decided, and they voted, their board of directors approved of consolidating both tournaments into 1 week. And I don't think that had ever been done before, with the exception about 1984. What they did is that they expanded from 4 classes to 6 classes for the 83-84 school year, and it's been that way ever since. And what they did is, one weekend they played the lower 3 classes, girls and boys, together, and then the following week they did the upper 3, boys and girls, together. And this is really only the second time that I can recall or even find where both have been combined into 1 week. Well, now we got all 6 classes intertwined, boys and girls, and you're looking at 98 or 96 teams in Lincoln for 1 week of basketball, and 12 state champions to be crowned. So it was a challenge. And I know Chris Schmidt and I kind of talked about it one day at work. It's like, how are we going to get through this? I said, well, we're going to find a way to do it. Mm-hmm. And when it came down time to it, and we found out what Lincoln teams were going to make it for the girls, well, that was kind of easy to plot out. And then the boys, we didn't have a lot. There were teams that we were hoping for, like Northeast, Southwest, to get in, and unfortunately, those teams got beat in either double or triple overtime in the district final. And I think both of those teams would have made a big difference too. I think in the Class A quarterfinal round, maybe posed a challenge to some of those Omaha teams that, of course, advanced on. But once we got closer, we found out that, there's 3 Lincoln boys teams in the area that we're going to cover. And then we decided we'll do the A semifinal for the boys, the A championship, and then anybody else from Lincoln that makes a district or a state championship, we'll cover too. And it worked out well, but there's a lot of planning that goes into it. I mean, you reserving, the teams that you want to cover, what games you want to cover, the application process for that. And of course, just coordinating who's going to do what, who's going to cover which game. And we were able to pull it off, and we got through it. And walking out of Pinnacle Bank Arena Saturday night following that Parkview Christian win, it was hard to believe at that point that the basketball season was over for us, because it just seemed like yesterday it got started.
That's how, that's exactly how it feels for me during football season. Like high school football season, for me, is over in the blink of an eye. Like it just feels like it goes by so fast. It feels like I'm getting ready for like that first game where it's a little warmer than you want it to be. And then I look up and I'm at Memorial Stadium for the finals, and doing coverage of all of that. Like so I totally understand what you mean there. Now, have they announced whether or not they're going to, are they going to continue doing it that way, where they have both go at the same time?
They're going to go back to the old format. I think this was kind of a run to see if there's another conflict like this that happens again, that they could probably result to it. this will not be a permanent thing, to my understanding. And that was kind of the scuttlebutt on press row. And in just talking to a few of the NSA officials, that it sounds like they're going to go back to the normal format next year.
Okay. So then I guess so for you in all of the games that you got to, call and see over the week, did you have any standout games from the week?
Well, the Southwest girls upsetting Millard South really stood out. And the reason why is that Southwestern came in and played their brand of basketball and dictated the tempo. They like to get up and down the court. They like to slow it down. They'll get up and down the court. Millard South, I think, wanted to run, move the ball, hit the outside shot, and they developed early foul trouble. Southwest capitalized, and really the only time that Southwest had to look back is when Millard South got to within, I think, 4 points in the fourth quarter. And it took maybe one free throw to ice it for Southwest. No, actually, it took 3 free throws, as I believe it was Kennedy Williams that did all that for Southwest to win the ball game. And I think that's one that really stood out because Millard South, if you go back the last 5 years, ironically, they were runner-up to Southwest in 2017, and then they were runner-up the following year in 2018. They made it to state in 2019, 20, and 21. So they've been there, and Bryce Myers has had a good program each and every year, but they've come up short. And it's either been in the championship or the semifinals. I think a year ago it was in the quarterfinal, but they've been so close and they haven't been able to win the big one. Well, Southwest wins. And their performance in the Class A Girls Championship with Fremont, it looked like maybe Southwest was going to continue that same momentum. But as you've seen, Taylor McCabe, who's heading off to the University of Iowa from Fremont, demonstrated just how much of a desire she had to win the gold and go out and finish her high school career with a bang. Over 2,200 points, I think, for her high school career at Fremont. That's highly remarkable. And I can't remember the exact total, but it's over 2,000 points. But for her to cap her career that way, and a lot of those other seniors that were on that team for Coach Kelly Flynn, who had previously won 11 state titles up at South Sioux City back in the 90s and 2000s. Just tremendous. Fremont, obviously, they were on a mission. They were all season long. But Southwest was there too. Lincoln High. And I want to talk about Lincoln High. Okay. The Lincoln High girls, they were in a difficult situation when they had a coaching issue a few years ago that became a legal issue. And then here comes Dominique Kelly. And Dominique from her days at Nebraska when she was playing for Connie Yori down there. And, of course, she was a star player at Lincoln Northeast, along with Charity Romagna, who's a Northeast coach and used to play at the University of Albany. But what Dominique Kelly has done at Lincoln High has been highly remarkable. She's really regrouped that program and made it into a power. She only loses, I think, 2 or 3 seniors. She's got a lot of those girls back next year, and I think Lincoln High is going to be a team to watch. But when you look at the boys' side of things, and what we could talk more maybe a little bit about the tournament, some of the other performances too. But on the boys' side, I did the prep and Bell West game on Thursday night in the semifinal. And Josiah Dotzler, I think, is going to be your top guy to watch next year in that 2023 recruiting class. His younger brother, Josh, played at Creighton, back in, 2006 to 2009 or 10, that time frame. And had a great career at Bellevue West before, too, and led them to state championships. But I think Josiah Dotzler, the way his game has improved, he's such a good guard. He's very quick. He's explosive off the dribble. He can shoot the outside shot. He had 24 points in a 23-5 third quarter comeback, 24 points in the game. But in that 23-5 comeback against Prep in the third quarter, he led that charge. And I think he's a guy that I think a lot of Division I coaches, whether it be a Greg McDermott, whether it be Fred Hoiberg or somebody else within the region, or maybe someplace else across the country, sees this kid on video and thinks, man, this kid could be a good fit for our program. I think Bellevue West, I think they were pretty tough, but Millard North had desire. And they really took control in that fourth quarter of that Class A championship on Saturday night. And Jason Green and David Harmon, I think, is a kid that, he may go the junior college route, but if he improves his game at the junior college level and goes Division I think whoever picks him up is going to have a very special talent in him. He really did a terrific job.
Yeah, he led them with 26 points in that championship game, and a lot of the talk, and rightfully so, goes to Jason Green. But David Harmon definitely had a good game in that one. A couple of things that stood out to me, and you almost mentioned it. I thought you were going to mention it. Kennedy Williams, related to her daughter of Amy Williams, Nebraska women's coach. I saw a really cool thing of Amy in the stands, just kind of taking photos, cheering along. She was fired up. Like I found that to be really awesome, because it's just so cool to see people that especially you see in like a work setting all the time, because we're always seeing Amy Williams obviously at her games and in press conferences and stuff like that, but to be able to see her to just be a mom and to just hang out and cheer for her kid, I thought was really neat.
It was, and I got to see that at the district final too, when they played Lincoln East over at Southwest, and Coach Williams walks in, her and it's Lloyd, right? If I remember right. Yeah, Lloyd Williams. They sit down. They sit down a few rows from where we're sitting at doing the ball game. And you kind of look down at where they're sitting with other family, and they're just sitting there enjoying the time, the atmosphere, watching their daughter play. And I really think Kennedy Williams is going to be a great basketball player the next 2 years in Lincoln. She's just so quick and explosive, and she's a naturally gifted athlete. She's a great softball player too. Mm-hmm. But I to see something like that, and even with Fred Hoiberg, when his two sons were playing at Pius X the last few years, watching him just be a dad, he comes walking in, he's got his green Pius X shirt on, whether it be a polo or a pullover or something like that. He's just being a dad. And all I could think of, I remember him playing at Iowa State. I remember him playing in the NBA, and here he is sitting like 30, 40 feet away from me in the bleachers, watching his sons play. I think it's tremendous when coaches get the opportunity to do that. So they're not working. They're just sitting there relaxing, watching their kids play and compete and have fun. And I think that's, they need a break from that, but it's probably a difficult thing to do when you're in a high profile position like those two are.
Yeah, it has to be. And I assume that, doing your team doing well at the moment, whenever that moment is of you going out and seeing those things, probably helps you out a lot. But either way, that's got to be really difficult, especially it just made me think, because I was never at a game with Fred there to watch his sons. But I'm just picturing in my mind what that had to have been like. He's trying to be inconspicuous, but you really can't be, because Fred Hoiberg, basketball players just stand out so much naturally anyway. And you get to see them because they're not covered up with any gear. So it's always just interesting to me on how that goes. I definitely want to mention one other thing too. The Lincoln Parkview, the Lincoln team that won. I am located in Lincoln. You are too. We record the show out of Lincoln. And we talk so much about it. And this happens in football all the time too, with high school football, is that it is nice to see Lincoln teams be able to make those runs. So it was nice to see Lincoln Parkview be able to, especially in basketball, where Omaha has just dominated so much in a lot of those different classes, to see them go ahead and get a win this weekend too, and take home the D2 state title.
It was certainly fun to see, because we did that championship game with Parkview and Falls City Sacred Heart a year ago, and Parkview did lead in that game, but Sacred Heart, as they always do, they find a way to win and come out with the state championship. Well, Parkview this year, they met again in the semifinals at the Devaney Center Thursday night. And I was over at PBA covering the Creighton Prep Bell West game. And I remember looking at Twitter, seeing what the score was. I'm like, oh my gosh, Parkview's up by double digits, and they're probably going to win it. And they ended up winning it. I think with what Nate Godwin had this year, he had a couple of kids. Victor Kochalowski is an exchange student, and the young man is a very gifted player. He really helped solidify the tempo on offense. They want to get up and down the court as much as possible. Maurice Reed did a great job. He was a senior guard for them. Jacquez Curry, who was slight of build but 6'8", And, with his slight of build, he looked like he was over 7 feet tall compared to the other kids out there. But there were times where you thought, he's hitting 3-pointers, but you thought, should he be out there shooting threes? I mean, when they played St. Mary's on Saturday night for that D2 championship, St. Mary's tallest player was 6'4". And I thought, a kid like Curry should be down underneath the basket, and they should be lobbing the ball to him and have him go up there with, those quick, easy layups, or even, a quick dunk or something like that. But, he played well. Konchaloski, Reed, Ulrich did a great job out there. Michael Alt, I think, is just a very gifted athlete. He had 19 points and hit some big 3-pointers in the first half that kind of spaced things out for them. But the way that they were getting the ball up and down the court in the second half, that was truly the difference maker. And St. Mary's, this was their chance to play for a first state title like Parkview Christian was. St. Mary's had been there before, but it had been 10 years. And, those kids were still kids at that point. They were probably in kindergarten or grade school. But, it's nice to see that the experience, while neither team had a lot of experience in a championship setting, Parkview was 1 year removed from their first ever trip. Parkview found a way to win, and they used their game to get up and down the court. And I find it fascinating when you look at all the championship games on Championship Friday and Saturday, the two highest score games were the Class A boys and the Class D2 boys. And you think Class D2 basketball is a bunch of small school or small town, basketball where you're out in the rural part of the state. That's not true. There's a lot of those schools that like to get up and down the court. And when you get into the middle range there with the C1s and so forth, even Class B the last couple of years, the tempo has been extremely slow. They're spreading it out, 4-corner Dean Smith type offense. But that's not to say that there wasn't any drama at all. I mean, there was a lot of drama in those championship games. But I think when you look at the scores, it's like, my gosh, Class A boys was high scoring and the D2 boys was high scoring. So they were the last two games of the tournament. It was fun to see. And Parkview gets their first ever state championship in any sport in school history. And it's quite the story, I think.
Yeah, that's remarkable when that happens. And it's so cool to see that, because just the excitement on everybody's face when you're able to be the first in school history and do something like that. Like I've been at a couple of football ones like that where teams have either beaten someone else, and now I'm losing it just now. It wasn't Bennington. It was a Class B team, and I'll look it up and put it in the show notes and just link the story that I wrote during the football season. It all runs together. Forgive me, but it was the Class B team that had beaten their rival for the first time in like 20 years or something like that. And just the outpouring and the way that everybody just rushed the field, and seeing those sorts of moments in high school sports is just so neat to be able to see those things. And there's really not a lot like that to compare it to.
When you got to go back more than 25 years ago for me when I was in high school. Lincoln basketball was dominant in the 1990s. And at the dawn of the decade, it was still heavily dominated by the Metro, but there were a lot of Lincoln teams at state. Mm-hmm. And then my sophomore year at Lincoln Northeast, we get to the state tournament. We came off a 7-14 year the year before, and then we go 22-2 into the Class A championship with Creighton Prep. And Prep had 5 Division I athletes in their starting lineup in different sports, not just basketball. You had TJ Pugh, who played at Kansas in basketball, Othello Meadows, who played basketball at East Carolina, Tim Ritter, who played football at Notre Dame, Eric Lauritsen and Ben Fogarty, who played baseball at Wichita State and Creighton, and Kyle Peterson. Kyle Peterson from ESPN. He was on that very team as a reserve, and he was, of course, a standout pitcher at Prep and later at Stanford University, was on that team. So they were very, very, very talented all around. And they beat us by 13. And, we were there for the first time in the finals in 4 years. And then the next year, my junior year and senior year, we won back to back. And then 2 more years after that, they won the next 2. And that was the first time in Class A history that a team had won 4 straight state championships. That had never been done before. We were the first 3-peat, but there was always been back-to-backs, but never a 3 or 4-peat. And then Omaha Central did the same thing in 2006 to 8, and then they did again from 2010 through 13, where they finally won 4 in a row. And one of those years they went undefeated. So you don't see a lot of that in Class A.
Mm-hmm.
You'd like to, but you don't, because the competition is so tough. And I made the comment to my wife Saturday night at the Class A game. I said, this is like a smaller version of Division I college basketball you're going to be seeing. I mean, these are the big schools in the state that are going to go head to head. And of course, you've got Division I talent on that floor in Jason Green and William Kyle, and maybe down the road for Josiah Doetzler and David Harmon, just some of those guys that we've mentioned. And that's what I compare it to. They're like 2 small Division I college basketball teams going at it. And I'm not taking anything away from the Class B teams, C1 on down. All those teams have great talent, and they've had kids that go play at the D1 level. I think Cale Jacobson and Ashland Greenwood is a tremendous talent, and I think he can play at the next level, at the D1 level, whether it be a Missouri Valley Conference school, a Summit League school, and maybe he wants to walk on at Nebraska. Who knows? He's got talent. He kind of reminds me of a Charlie Easley in a way, that played at Pius and was at Nebraska a year, now at South Dakota State and heading off to the tournament. But Jacobson, I think all around is just a gifted athlete. But that story with Ashland Greenwood winning on a buzzer beater for their first boys title in basketball, that Evan Shepard hit that shot and that place went berserk. Stories like that. How about Fort Calhoun? They had not been to the dance in 99 years. And what do they do the first day? They upset the number 1 seed Wahoo. They go to overtime, I believe, with Auburn, who is the 3-time defending champion in Class C1, and Auburn pulls it out late. They could have been in the finals against Ashland Greenwood. That would be the Nebraska equivalent of a Hoosier story right there.
Right.
A town that is not known for their basketball, and then all of a sudden they explode onto the scene and they pull off the upset. They're 1 win away from playing for a final. And I'm trying to remember how they did in the third place game on Saturday, but I can't remember right offhand. But just stuff like that. That's why I think the Nebraska State High School Basketball Tournament, in addition to the state track meet at Omaha Burke, it's one of the more well-attended events and one of the more storied subs you're going to find each and every year. And this is in a football crazy state, as you very well know. And football is still a big deal at the high school level in Nebraska, but it's not like a Texas or anything like that, but it's still a big deal. But somehow in March, when the high schools are in Lincoln and they're playing in the state tournament, that's the buzz all over town. People are talking about these teams coming in, who made it from Lincoln, who made it from Omaha, who made it from all the way out west. Who traveled the farthest? Who traveled? Who traveled the closest? If it was the closest, it'd be Lincoln High or somebody like that. If you boil down to it, depending on direction and so forth. But yeah, it's nice to see stuff like that, and that's why I think for me it's a bittersweet time of the year because it's fun, but the end of the line is near.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's definitely a tournament that has a rich history and tradition. And I think a lot of people, it's not underrated because I think people here get it, but you just don't understand it, I don't think, unless you're here, like how big of a deal that state basketball tournament really is. Now, every week we end the show with my favorite segment of the week called Put Them on Blast, where we basically put someone on blast for something that they did or said.
Put them on blast.
This week, it is going to be the guest going first. I'm always interested to see what the guest picks for this. So, Motz, who are you putting on blast?
In terms of athlete or team or whoever?
Whoever.
The Lakers.
Oh, man.
I know. You know what? From you being from Chicago, you grew up watching the Bulls in the 90s and that dynasty, but you've always had a very special place in your heart for the Lakers.
I do.
But, with all that talent, there is no way, shape, or form. There can't be any excuses on why they should not be performing to the best of their ability, because I don't know if it's a chemistry thing, if it's an ego thing. It could be one or it could be both, whatever. But that franchise ought to be whipping everybody's tail left and right. They should. And I'm a Phoenix Suns guy. And the Suns, ran him out of the gym.
They definitely did. I heard about it from Jacob Padilla.
Oh, that's right. He's a big Suns fan, isn't he?
Yeah, he is.
But I think the Lakers. See, I grew up, the Lakers. I love the Lakers when they had Magic, Kareem, Norm Nixon, Jamal Wilkes, Kurt Rambis was on that team.
James Worthy on the
James Worthy, Mike McGee, who was from Omaha and played at the University of Michigan. He was actually one of the backups, I think, to Magic. He was like the 7th or 8th guy off the bench for them. And when Magic got hurt one time in the playoffs, he started in place of Magic. So that was, if there's any sort of Nebraska connection to an NBA team, I kind of latched on to it. It's like, oh, Mike McGee's from Omaha, you say? Yeah. And same thing with Phoenix, because I think he played with Phoenix for a little bit too later in his career. But I just don't understand how you could have all that talent with LeBron James, who's 37, almost 38 years old, and he's dropping, 40, 50 points.
Couple 50-point games last week.
Yeah. So I guess my blast would be on, with all that talent, and you can't corral all that talent and make it into a cohesive unit to where you can go out and you just flat out dominate the league. If you've got guys like LeBron, Russell Westbrook, Anthony Davis out there, you should be able to make it work. But if it's not working, then you got to make a change somewhere. Who do you get rid of? Part
of the problem for them, honestly, is that they just look so disinterested at all times. Like, and I think they have a streak going where it's 9 games, I believe, in a row that they've been down by double digits at some point during the game. Like, and to me, what that ultimately says is, hey, the coach has to go because the coach has lost the team, but also, like, it's also a pride thing. Like, you got to be better than that. Like, it just can't be like that, even with Anthony Davis out right now, and he's hoping to come back here soon, where you're just always getting behind like that. Like, it just should not be that way. And they also just play awful defense. Like, one of the, like, is it 73 points or so, like, they gave up in the first half this year, the first quarter. Like, it's just ridiculous amounts of points that they give up, and partly because I think that they're just not dialed into whatever it is that Frank Vogel is selling on defense. They don't care right now, and it's a huge problem.
Well, and you're two seasons removed from winning the NBA championship too.
Also, they blew that up. So part of the problem is they made all the wrong moves in how they blew that team up. And went away from kind of the identity that got them that championship, thinking that they needed to chase a third star. They let LeBron and AD pick the third star, and they wanted Russ instead of DeMar DeRozan, who is he was like a dark horse MVP candidate, got the Bulls playing really well. And so, like, they just make bad decisions. I just don't, like, there's no other way around it. You just picked the wrong star. You really did.
Do I get another pick, or is that it?
Well, I mean, if you've got another one, you can go with it with the second. We got the first have a double dip. Go for it.
Well, I want to point out, as we say along the lines of basketball, Grayson Allen and him and that hard foul on Alex Caruso a while back. Every now and then on social media, I keep seeing clips that pop up with that, and it's disturbing. And when's enough going to be enough? And finally, the league steps in and says something about the attitude and behavior of Grayson Allen. I mean, that's just not healthy.
No, because you're going to, like, you did get someone hurt, but you're also you have to, at some point as a league, and they did step in so that just doesn't continue, because it can get out of hand. Like, you're going to end up where someone's, 12th man just comes out there and takes a complete cheap shot at him, because he's always out there doing antics like this. And there's a fine line between trying to intimidate and make sure that guys think twice versus just being outright dirty. And Grayson Allen has been on that line for years and years.
Well, even at Duke.
Duke. Yeah. Like it for a long time. And so it's one of those things where I think people needed the league, not even people, I think people were on alert. The league needed to be on alert for that. And I think they waited too late to make a statement about him just in general, because he's had other incidents in the NBA too. But I like it. I like that you went double dip put him on blast.
Well, I appreciate you letting me do that.
No,
I feel honored now.
No, yeah, you should. I'll make note of that. Jeff Motz, the first ever. For my blast, it's funny. We're going to stick in the NBA for who I'm going to put on blast. I'm going to go with Kyrie Irving. Now, Kyrie has been a multiple-time blast winner, which is very deserved. But it's also going to be Kyrie and kind of the Nets in general. So if you guys didn't see it yesterday, Sunday, we recorded this on Monday, it goes live on Tuesday. Kyrie was at the Nets game as a spectator. Now, in part because he won't get the vaccine. In New York State, or New York has a mandate that basically makes it to where, unvaccinated players can attend the game in Brooklyn, but you can't sit on the bench because of the city's private sector mandate. In turn, that was put out by the Brooklyn mayor Eric Adams, and Kevin Durant kind of put the mayor on blast after the game as well. But the reason that Irving and the Nets have to go on blast is that the way that they're reacting to this is weird to me, because it's not as if this is just random and it was just done to Kyrie yesterday. We didn't just learn that Kyrie was in this situation, and it's a situation of his choosing. That's fine. It's America. You do what you want to do. But on the other hand, as we've said all along about the Kyrie Irving situation, I've said multiple times, I'll say it again, just because you're able to choose what you do doesn't mean that there aren't any type of consequences to that. He's essentially the only player in the league going through this right now. So it's not as if like it's Kyrie and a handful of other guys that are having this problem, right? It's just him. So I need people to chill on like making Kyrie Irving some sort of martyr in this situation, because he's not like and I would like to say that two things can be true at once. We can have a situation where I do believe that Kyrie needs to be put on blast for this, but also the rule is kind of dumb, but the rule is the rule. Like, we know what it is at this point. And so just to see him sitting courtside and like hanging out, like, it's just weird. It's just a little too much. So for all of that, and Kevin Durant, popping off after the game, they're all going on blast.
Yeah. And I understand the each to their own, mentality, choose what you want to do. But, in a crisis situation like we've had the last 2 years, Greg, I mean, you got to think about common sense. Right. And is the vaccine going to kill? Is it going to kill off this virus? No, it's going to prevent the symptoms from being worse. Right. If you don't get them, if you don't get the vaccine. And we've had the 2 shots. We still need to get our booster, and we were already qualified to get the booster on Christmas of all days. Wow. But I came down with a sinus infection, and then a few weeks later, thought I got it back. Turns out it was COVID. But the one thing about the version that I got, it just felt like it was a long, drawn-out sinus infection, because you're coughing, you're hacking, you get the post-nasal drip sort of thing. And that's what it felt like. I really didn't have a lot of chills or anything. Didn't really feel like I had a fever. More so of a chest or upper respiratory type deal. But again, if had I not gotten the vaccine, the first 2, I probably could have been in the hospital. Right. For my age, my size, and I'm an asthmatic, and that was one thing I was worried about. And every now and then I get these dry coughs, and I think that's just a remnant or a side effect of having the virus. But I think with Kyrie Irving, if you want to be part of a cohesive team effort at home, on the road, I mean, you almost have to stop and think about it, maybe bite the bullet.
Yeah, it's just like at this point, I don't think he's going to do it. But I also think that another part of the reason why Brooklyn is, I think, like in a weird spot, is that they tried to just kind of go along with Kyrie. I didn't think that there was at least publicly, was not a lot of pressure on him. And I'm not saying you got to pressure everybody into this, but at the same time, you're the only one on your team, dude, and you're largely important to us if you're Brooklyn winning the championship. So like,
huge.
Key part of what they had going on, and they made such a big, like, and this is why I never quite understood, like, and I guess part of the reason, and James Harden has his own thing going on, but part of the reason why reportedly that James Harden wanted out was because of the Kyrie Irving situation, which I don't know that I would blame him. I don't know if that is 100% true, because like I said, James Harden has his own issues, but if I'm Kevin Durant, and I'm like as playing at the top of my game right now, and this is my championship window, I'd be really mad. Now, it doesn't seem like he is. Like, he embraced him after the game last night. After Durant had a marvelous game, by the way, yesterday, with Kyrie sitting courtside. Another one. He's just so good and gifted. But it's just a weird situation that I'm very curious to see how it presents itself in the playoffs as this team kind of positions itself to try and make a run, even though they had been really bad since the All-Star break.
Do you think the Nets will do something with Kyrie Irving after the season? Like, try to renegotiate a contract deal to maybe, because of what's happened?
It's so difficult because it really, to me, comes down to whether or not KD wants that. If KD goes to them and says, we've got to either get him out of here, or can we figure out something so we can get another guy in here? Or really, depending on what's going to happen with Ben Simmons, like, that's kind of the wild card of all of this with their team, is that, like, I keep forgetting that he's there because he hasn't played basketball in so long. The storylines for the NBA, like, that's just going to be a huge one to see him come back and what they're able to do. Like, that it'll make things really interesting out east. But no, I don't think that he's going they're going to try to do anything with Kyrie after the season. I think that they're kind of married to the situation and just hope for the best, throw caution to the wind, and say, hopefully we get a championship out of it.
Yep.
All
right, all you can do.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's going to do it for us. Subscribe to the podcast everywhere you listen to them. Rate us and leave us a 5-star review. If you leave 4, I'm inclined to think you're a hater, and nobody wants that. Make sure you're checking out the other podcasts on the Hail Varsity Network, the Mind Your Own podcast, Varsity Club, Nebraska Preps Post Game Show, and the Hail Varsity Radio Show. Also, make sure you're back on that Hail Varsity YouTube page. I'm back on there with another recruiting question of the week video. You can get after us on Twitter as well, or you can email the show straight up breakdown at hailvarsity.com. I will catch y'all next week.
A Huda Media Production.